Welcome back to the Red Eye Garage. I'm Seth, and today we're going to be talking about my Mazda Rotary powered Willys Jeep. Let's kick this video off with what inspired me to do this build. Most of the time when people see this for the first time, or they hear it going by, or they hear me talking about it, they say, why would you ever want to do that? Even some of my close friends were not on board with this project. You know who you are. If you've followed my page for any length of time, you know I don't do traditional stuff in the shop. None of my Jeeps are restorations. None of them have original drivetrains, and that's just kind of what I did. So after I did the TDI swap, I was thinking, what could I do that no one's done before? Back when I built the TDI Jeep, there were no real documented builds on it, and I wanted to try it and learn for myself, and it worked out well. What else have I not seen before? One thing I had never seen done before was to put a rotary engine of any type in an old Jeep like this and keep it four-wheel drive. So that's exactly what I did. Up until this build, I didn't know anything about rotary engines. I always thought RX7s were cool, but I'd never even driven one or popped the hood on one in person, so I was a complete newbie when it came to them, so I started doing a ton of research. And I can definitely say that the R&D and the Googling and the watching videos on this project took more time than actual in-the-shop fabrication and mechanical work. So I started looking up detailed stuff about the engines, and on paper, despite all the Facebook rumors and people telling me it'd be a dumb project and a waste of time, I'm like, this just kind of makes sense. The rotary engine is about 17 inches from front to back. It weighs around 200 pounds, and this particular one makes 160 to 170 horsepower. But I know what you're all saying. You're all thinking it already. I get thousands of comments. It doesn't make any torque. And that's just not quite accurate. I actually started to talk to people, look at the specs, look at dyno sheets, and compare this engine with other engine swaps that people have done, and myself included. For comparison, let's talk about the engine that was in here. This had the 134 flathead Go Devil engine. It's called the L head is what most people call it, or the Go Devil. And they make, at the crank, 60 horsepower and about 100 foot-pounds of torque. Now that engine is geared and set up pretty good for these old Jeeps. That's why they work great, and I love those engines. I'm never gonna, knock them or dislike a stock Jeep. I just like to do things differently. So the stock engine is 60 horsepower and 100 foot-pounds of torque. With the modifications I've done on this engine, it's probably around 170 horsepower and around 150, 160 foot-pounds of torque. But the torque curve in RPM on these is very different. Everyone was saying how that's such a bad thing, but it's really not if you plan for it. So we're talking a lightweight vehicle, unlimited gearing options, and the rotary engine is so small, I had a lot more flexibility with the transmission and things like that. So let's talk about some real-world data. I've been driving this Jeep for, I think 3.5 years now, so I think I have a pretty good take on how it works and performs in the real world. I also have the TDI Jeep, which is like the complete opposite end of the spectrum. So I have a good comparison for torque and power and economy and things like that. And I have to say, a lot of people ask me which one I like the best. And honestly, the performance of this engine with this setup does not compare to any of the other builds I've done or any of the other stock Jeeps that I've driven. This thing just plain works. And no, you don't have to run it out to 10,000 RPM. This doesn't even go to 10,000 RPM. When selecting the engine, I picked the highest compression non-turbo rotary from Mazda. So this is a Series 5 13B out of a 91 RX7. This is a non-turbo engine. A lot of people say, oh, you got to put a turbo on it. And yeah, that would be fun. It could make more power. But what makes this engine simple, reliable, and just easier to swap is that it's a non-turbo engine. And this Jeep, as it's sitting right now with a full tank of gas, weighs 2,100 pounds. So now I have You know, a 9,000 RPM engine that weighs 2,000 pounds, makes 160 horsepower, and it has just the right gear ratio so that when I'm at a good cruising speed, this engine is still in its happy place. Another common misconception is that you have to rev this thing to the moon constantly. And I didn't know what to expect because this was basically just one giant science experiment. And after years and miles of driving it, I can tell you, you don't have to do that at all. Most of the time when I shift, I'm at like 3,000 RPM, which is pretty much standard for a regular gas engine. But the cool thing is when we're either on the street or specifically on the trail, if I'm on a hill or something, a lot of the other Jeeps will try a gear, they'll go up, spin out or stall, come back down, try a different gear or get farther back and hit it faster. Whereas this thing, you just put the pedal down and just keep revving it. So it makes really good power from, I would say, about 2,000, 2,500 RPM right up to 9,000. And that's where I think this is awesome. So whether it's practical or not, or you like that or not, it just works. When comparing this to the TDI, this Jeep right here, whether it's on the street or the trail, will eat the TDI alive, and that makes, I'm pointing over here because you're sitting on the TDI. This Jeep makes about 230 foot-pounds of torque, so significantly more, but this thing will outperform it. The only place the TDI does not shine, which everybody told me that was the case, and I pretty much understood that was going to happen, is fuel economy. So this thing does use more fuel than the TDI, but people get mad when I tell them it's still better than an L head or an F head. My stock Jeeps usually get 10 to 14 miles to the gallon, and you're running wide open almost all the time to maintain 45 miles an hour. Whereas this thing, if you're cruising down the road, you're not using much throttle because the power is there. So I get about 17 miles to the gallon with this. I've only checked it a few times because I don't really care. On the trail, if I fill this tank up, it doesn't use much fuel at all. But if we're on a road trip, it's drinking mid to, probably 15 to 17 miles to the gallon. So I'm pretty happy with that. And I think for what it is, that's pretty good. So there's your fuel economy and real world torque opinion from me. And I think my opinion matters because I'm probably the only one that's ever really driven something like this. There's not a lot of four-wheel drive rotary powered vehicles in the United States. In the Philippines and stuff, I've seen Samurais and two-wheel drive Jeeps, so those guys know what they're doing. But as far as Jeeps like this in America, you're probably looking at the only one right now. So that's enough of me yapping. Let's take a look at it. And this entire thing is documented on my Wankel Willys playlist, so be sure to check that out. But here's what it looks like. So this was what really intrigued me. The engine block, this is all transmission. The engine block starts right here and ends right there. So that's your engine. There's 2 rotors in there, no pistons, 4 spark plugs, and about 200 pounds. And the beauty of this engine is because it's so short, I was able to run a 5-speed. So I didn't need a Warren overdrive or a Spicer 18 transfer case with super low gears to just try to get this thing in the right RPM range. I've got 5-speed, so this is out of an RX7. It's the transmission that came with this engine, so I have lots of good clutch options. Parts are easy. Your maintenance on this is so simple because it's so tiny. So like right here's the slave for the clutch, alternators right on top, water pump, distributor, everything's just right here and super easy to work on. As with any stock wheelbase Willys conversion, you're really limited by this tiny 80-inch wheelbase. So to stick a long 5-speed in there, I had to take advantage of this small engine and also had to slam it forward as far as I could. So right here is the end of the water pump pulley. I took off the mechanical fan and it's tucked right in there as close as it can be. And then I have 2 electric fans. Rotaries do make a lot of heat, so I would say that's a con of them. You know, for the package compared to the TDI, this thing makes a lot more heat, so these fans on the trail are pretty much running all the time. I do have an oil cooler as well. My oil cooler used to be mounted right here, but when I did the power steering conversion, I had to move it outside, which could be better, but I had fans on it, but there's just a lot of heat that builds up under here. Adding a turbocharger would definitely make that even worse. So my oil cooler is tucked behind the winch right here. This was kind of a temporary setup when I did the power steering conversion, so that may change down the road, but for right now it works pretty good. So I mentioned that it runs hot. It doesn't overheat. I've never had an overheating issue. It has, I think originally these had a 190 or 195 thermostat. I have a 180 in it now. In the winter, the fans don't really run. It makes a big, ambient temperature makes a big difference, and also if you're moving or not. So I designed this, I wanted to do trails and slow speed, so the cooling system was really important. I'm running an RX7 radiator, so this is the stock radiator size that would have been paired with this engine, but it's in a lot less good airflow package, so heat is an issue, so the fans run, and I've got the oil cooler, but you do have to keep an eye on the temperature. I mentioned I'm running a Mazda 5-speed, so this is where the shifters landed. I'm pretty happy with it because it's very close to a stock Jeep. When you look inside and the hood's down, it really doesn't look like a whole lot has been done. Don't mind my little defrost vent. So 5-speed, so it has an overdrive 5th gear, and 1st gear in this is it's like in the T90C range. It's like high 3s, so the crawl gear is still pretty good. And then this is where the magic happens. The key to making this swap work well is the transfer case, because I wanted a low crawl ratio, and I wanted to be able to run 60 miles an hour if I wanted to on the road, but still be able to crawl while keeping the engine in its, you know, happy spot. So this is a Suzuki Samurai transfer case. So the Suzuki Samurai case is really cool. It's a divorce transfer case, so it has flanges on both ends. It was meant to have a little shaft in between the transmission and transfer case. I made a special adapter, so I'll put some pictures up here showing you what that looked like, and that allowed me to basically smush them right together. So a lot of people said that wouldn't work too. It would have broke by now if it was going to fail. I used a cradle in the transfer case and kind of made some big goofy adapter thing. But it turned out really well. I worked really hard on it. I machined everything so it was perfectly centered. You know, I used dial indicators to make sure it was all true. It's a slip yoke on the end, so that allows the in and out play. I have a lot of play there. And then, you know, just got it all bolted up together. The entire drivetrain is one unit. Even though it's a divorce transfer case, when the engine torques and moves everything, it all moves at once. So it prevents, you know, major stress between the transmission and transfer case. So the Suzuki Samurai transfer case was perfect because it has a reduction in high and low range. So even when I'm in 5th gear at 50 miles an hour, this engine is still running about 3,800 RPM. So at 50 or 55 miles an hour in 5th gear, if you push the pedal to the floor, it's going to go, and it's going to keep going until it gets to 9,000 RPM or wherever the fuel cut is set at. I went with 6.5 to 1 gears in the transfer case, so that gives you a high range reduction of 1.7 and a low range of 6.5. So that gives me 126 to 1 crawl ratio. So that's where I argue when people say it doesn't have enough torque to rock crawl. It's all about the vehicle weight and the gearing. I've seen rotary engines smaller than this and full-size tractors doing competitive tractor pulls, and they just rev, you know, because they're geared so low. The weight kind of goes out the window when you get geared that low. So there's endless possibilities. No matter what engine swap you want to do, if you design your vehicle to work with that, it's going to work fine. I'll just briefly talk about the rest of the Jeep. This had an L head in it, and you guys saw the whole build on that. Started out as a 1949 CJ3A. It was a Navy commissioned Jeep. I hated to tear it apart, but it was so rotted. It wasn't intended to be a GPW, which is sort of what it is now. It's a mutt like most Jeeps are. The frame is CJ3A, and the axles. But other than that, it's pretty much completely different Jeep than I started with. It has a Dana 25 up front with a Lock-Right locker and a Dana 44 with a Lock-Right in the rear also. It has four-wheel disc brake, dual master cylinder, and now I have the new Kaiser Willys power steering kit, which is awesome. That's one of the best mods I've done to this. It just really makes drivability much better. I also put in their 15-inch low-profile steering wheel, so it's a lot more comfortable and I have a lot more belly room while driving it. I needed a body when I started putting this back together, and someone on Facebook had this GPW reproduction tub, so I'm like, well, it's basically a flat fender, so I grabbed it. It was super cheap, and then my friend Dustin had all these yellow parts. They're original 45 GPW, so like the seat frames, the hood, the grille, fenders, and the windshield frame are actual original Ford stamped parts. So a lot of people get mad about that too. They think I took a World War II Jeep and put a Japanese engine in it, and that's not the case. These are just recycled old parts. The Jeep I started with probably would have ended up in the scrapyard, so I don't think I destroyed history as so many people tell me. I think I kept some history alive and kind of made it my own thing. When I removed this engine from the car, it had stuff all over it. So all these little studs here, or spots where studs would have been, was a very complex and flawed vacuum system for emissions, because this was a 1991, so it had a lot of junk hanging off of it. So I stripped it down completely. I'll throw some pictures in here of the process. And I added a Racing Beat 4-barrel intake. That's this aluminum piece right here. So this is a 6-port engine, and it had those little tubes on it for low-end power. I got rid of all that stuff and simplified it. I put a distributor off of a 12A on it, so this is a regular electronic distributor type ignition, so it's very simple and reliable. And then I added Phytech EFI, so it doesn't stumble or anything when you're on a steep trail, and it starts every time. Hot or cold, no choke. I've just been totally thrilled with it. A lot of people don't like Phytech, but as long as you use your brain when you install it, it's actually a really good system. And I paired that with their fuel pump reservoir. So the high pressure fuel pump is inside here. I have a low pressure Holley fuel pump feeding that. So it also stores some fuel in here. So if you're running low in the tank and you're on a hill, this keeps about 1 liter of fuel in it and maintains pressure till the low pressure pump can pick up. So I've never had fuel starvation or any issues. This setup has been super reliable, and I highly recommend it. So I hope you enjoyed this video. Thanks for watching. If you want to see anything else specific that wasn't covered, let me know. Also, I've got the other Jeeps here. I'm going to try to get some more content, do some more high mileage updates as I've been driving these more. It's really cold here, so I'm excited for spring to get out and start doing some more Jeeping and off-roading. But I think that's it. So that's the Wankel Willys. Thanks for watching. Catch you later.